Why can't I hear you?
How about now?
100%. Oh, there you are. Joe, what's up?
It's
I'm
user
here.
error, brother. It's because I had 2 beers before showtime and I had the
No,
mute button.
no, it's technical difficulties.
Technical defects.
Defects. Technical defects. Yeah, you have to realize I grew up with black and white television. So every day, technology, a lot of other people like me. It's the one advantage of living through the 60s and the 70s.
Right on. I
Things,
can understand that completely. All right, so let me do the intro real fast. Again, ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the holdup. Welcome to another edition of Technical Defects. I am your host, Joe, and this next to me is Mr. Robert Bruce, who I've got a list of things on here, so bear with me one moment. He is the head pop culturist at Popculturism.
that's
He
right.
is the co-creator, co-owner of the New Jersey Horror Con and Film Festival,
Correct,
and
also.
seen on AMC's Comic Book Men.
Since 2011, I actually am one of the producers, and a lot of people don't know that, but I actually have 82 episodes as credits for producing, consulting producer and producer. Most people aren't aware of that, but when we first started working on the show, I was brought in. I auditioned for the on air, but they brought me behind the scenes, and I've really worked primarily behind the scenes. I've been on about 22 to 25 episodes, depending on how you cut it.
Gotcha. I just need to make sure that everybody can hear us out there now. Chris is saying we're good. All right, so let's start from the beginning, Rob. I actually don't even know where to begin. Do we begin with Popculturism or the
Pop Culture is the company that I kind of run my online sales and research. I do a lot of research. Most of what I do is research. I'm always trying to find rare stuff, discover what things are, and sort of bring them to the forefront through whether it's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. I do a lot of posting. I've been a collector, scavenger all my life, really 1986. Although I did a lot of conventions as an attendee in the late 70s. I went to my first convention in 1975. I was, still a teenager in high school. Primarily Jack, for me, was really what got me involved in comic books, reading comic books. Fourth World, Jimmy Olsen, that time period, the Boom Tube, was very, very impactful on me, and my just wanting to, smoke weed and read comic books, drink beer. That was like Jack Kirby was it. And I give a great nod to like one of my oldest friends, Dave Windorf, who some of you maybe know he is. He's the lead singer and the founder of the rock group Monster Magnet. He and I have been friends since high school. He actually has a credit with Marvel for creating a character, Negasonic Teenage Warhead. He actually created that character, and they've utilized it in the Deadpool movies. She appears in the next Deadpool movie, and he actually gets a credit. But he and I and a bunch of us, Scott Ruth, who was in Ripping Corpse, the first one of the early thrash metal bands in the early late 70s, 76, 77, 78. We would sit around, read, discuss comics, listen to Hawkwind and Motorhead, and that's really where I got my cut my teeth, as some people would say, on comics and pop culture in general.
So right now, are you concentrating more on the Popculturism, the New Jersey Horror Con, or what's going on?
I do both. CBM's in hiatus. We're waiting to hear about that. Popculturism is year round. I mean, I'm a guy who gets up at 4 a.m. and goes to flea markets on Thursday, Friday, Saturday. A lot of people know who I am. Nothing's changed. I've been doing that for 30 years, whether it was in New York or Boston or LA or Florida. I mean, I've been to about 50 flea markets across the country and well over 1,200 conventions. I did done all the New York Comic Cons, even predating them. I did most of the Big Apple conventions through the 80s and 90s. I went to my first San Diego in 93, and I've just sort of been in this world. I was very fortunate in the late 80s, early 90s. I worked with Ted Hake, who owns Hake's Americana. He gave me a couple of credits in some of the Overstreet books and the early 90s, 93, the price guide to serial premiums and radio premiums. I was really big in that movement. And it's just a discovery. So, yeah, I'm working on Popculturism as a Popculturist. I've been working on NJ HorrorCon's an everyday thing. Our show's in September 21st. We just had one in March, so we're getting our guests and our vendors together. And I'm actually in the middle of doing a treatment for a potential new show that I have a meeting this Thursday about, which I can't get into because we're still sort of getting all the ducks in order, but it's unrelated to what I've been doing in a certain different direction. And I won't be on it per se. At least my goal is not to be on television, but is more to be a producer behind the scenes on television. And I've got a lot of friends right now, you know, since all the other things that have taken off. But
Sure.
that's it. Every day is a new adventure. You know, every day is it's about collecting for me, really.
Well, you mentioned collecting, and I know you buy and sell for people also, but you as a collector, what do you collect?
I focus primarily on Japanese Takatsu vintage vinyl figures from the late 60s, early 70s, which is basically live action TV, kaiju, Old Man's like the most popular, but Kamen Rider and Megaloman, and just there's probably about 20 or 30 different shows that I'm currently collecting vinyl figures made by Bullmark and Marasan and Bandai, which is, everybody knows Bandai, and before that Popey. I collect Popey, Godzilla, and King Saurus, which are Ultraman figures. And you can go to Popculturism on Instagram. I just put up about 5 or 6 images. One of them has a bunch of Takatsu figures, including Diamond Eyes, and just these oddball live action Japanese, sort of their version of Batman and Robin and Superman. When I was a kid, growing up in Red Bank, New Jersey, we could get Channel 48 on UHF, which was most famous for running the Uncle Floyd show in the 70s and 80s. But in the late 60s, they would run Marine Boy, they would run Stingray, they would run Ultraman, they would run Tobor the Eighth Man. But nobody knows what Tobor the Eighth Man is. It's an earlier anime. But Tobor was a robot spelled backwards, Tobor, but he got his strength from smoking cigarettes. So he would run smoking a cigarette, getting stronger. And obviously, at some point, that hit a wall. So, big Tobor fan, So, most of my youth was watching those oddball TVs, Kimba the White Lion, and it just sort of stuck with me, and I got into it. I obviously collect superhero toys and comic books. I have about 20,000 comic books. I've been collecting free comic books, premium promo from the 50s and 60s that they give away with flour or shoes or just some oddball thing. I'm really into collecting oddball things. I also collect political pins. I have over 2,000 political pins in my collection.
So in your adventures, what is the most valuable collectible you've held in your hands?
Oh, the most valuable that I personally bought? I bought in about probably 2005. I bought a slush-led dinosaur that on the side of it said "Creature from the Lost World." It was a promotional piece that was given out at the first Lost World premiere in New York City. And this was 1925, so it was a silent movie. I bought it at the same flea market I go to every Friday morning, Collingwood Flea Market, for $20. It was sculpted by Willis O'Brien. Now, if anybody knows who Willis O'Brien was, he was the guy who created King Kong. So it had this huge legacy in Provence. It actually was stamped on the back by Waterson Madison, who was the producer of that original movie in 1925, where Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote that book and wrote Sherlock Holmes, and is one of the preeminent adventure writers of the early half of the 20th century. I mean, one of the top 3, Edgar Rice Burroughs, and probably Lester Dent, who Kenneth Robeson, who created Doc Savage. But those guys really were held down the fort, Sax Rohmer to a certain degree, and there's a number of other people. But you think of adventure, and you think of Tarzan, you think of Sherlock Holmes. So finding that was amazing. And I'd heard about it, and the guy who I bought it from, who, you know, has since passed away, he put it out and said, "Hey, well, I brought this. You know, it was sitting on the table. It was $20. It was valued at about 42 to 4,500. Now, that's a $20 purchase. The biggest thing I ever bought was a piece of Andy Warhol artwork, which I still have buried in my vault. I paid a quarter for it, and that's been last time I had that estimated at 22,000. I bought that. And I hate to say this, I went back and I gave them a donation afterwards, but I bought it at a thrift store. So I bought it at the thrift store, you know, ran it home. But back then I actually had a shop of my own and kind of did some research. Said, oh, this is crazy. So I put it in with my 12-backs, which sit in a bank vault. You know, and those are sort of like retirement funds. But that's probably the best thing that I ever bought. But I've held, you know, countless things. I probably, you know, I tell people that I've probably held over 1 million items, and that's not to be not the truth. I mean, I probably have 130,000 items in my own warehouse right now in my own collection.
Wow.
I did a lot of work for Anthony Snyder's Comics Online. In his warehouse, which is 7,700 square feet, he's got well over 1 million items. And when he started setting it up, you know, he hired me on. I'm an old friend of his. And we went in, we structured it and filled it up. So, I mean, holding items is sort of one of those things. I mean, yeah, I've held an Action 1, and yeah, I've held a Batman, you know, 27, and, you know, on and on and on. But for me, it's like you get up in the morning and you try to find things. I'm really like, I believe that a collector is the same thing as a mastodon hunter. So if sun's up, you're already late. You got to get out there. You know, everybody asks, well, how do you find things? You go and you turn over rocks. You go to the flea markets. You go to the estate sales. You go to the, you know, whatever. You go dumpster dive. I found carded Negos in dumpsters, you know, which is true. Literally. Mind you, there were Star Wars Megos, but they were still carded.
That is awesome. So what is your holy grail item that you have not been able to find for your personal collection yet?
It's a good question. I mean, there's things that I see now that I'm sort of kind of gearing up to spend some shekels on. I collect like Barum 1, which is another way Takatsu shows, really oddball 2 years. I really like the characters. There's some vinyl figures I'm looking for. Are they crazy expensive? No, they're very hard to find. I don't believe in holy grails, because I think what you have to do is you got to get out there and find the items. So the things that I have never seen is what I'm looking for. You know, I buy, a lot of times I don't buy the He-Man figures. I don't buy the G.I. Joe figures. I buy, you know, the weird, you know, monster toy carded, or the knockoff Pirates, or the knockoff Remco. It's based on the He-Man. I'm really into knockoff figures, probably too much. Blow mold Mexican figures. I've got like 2 foot tall blow mold Robocops, and whatever is like really weird. Like, this is my old office. My kid actually is sort of taking it over. He's doing stop motion animation. He's got a small company. He's already produced his 4th stop motion animated motion video, and we're working on some things with a well-known horror director that hopefully he's going to do a segment with them. But, you know, but my warehouse is filled. It's got all my, you know, the collectible things, the collection. And the collectibles is sort of a bad word, because, you know, you don't want to buy collectibles. You want to buy toys. You want to buy comics. You want to buy records. I collect a lot of records, too. So I really don't have a holy grail. I hate to say I've seen it all, but to a degree I have, and I'm always looking for things I've never seen. That's really what drives me and gets me up in the morning. And I tend to have a good radar, and we tend to seem to be able to find things.
Awesome. I'm going to pull up a picture. Hold on 1 second for me.
And Jay Harcon Film Festival. And my partner in that's Ryan Scott Weber, great guy, well-known independent horror producer, director on his own rights. He just had a movie come out not too long ago. And you know, it's working on conventions. I've done a number of conventions. I also co-created Asbury Park Comic Con and New York Comic Fest. So I love doing conventions. I love, you know, getting people together, like-mindedness, and creating a certain vibe, and then having people come in and just really enjoy themselves. So we've recently moved from Edison to our fall show is going to be down in Atlantic City, and then we're doing our spring show back up in central North Jersey. So we've actually moved and tripled the size of our floor space, primarily because we got crowded and the hotel wasn't working with us the way we would have liked them to have. You know, we sold out a lot of rooms. We sell out the same amount of rooms down in Atlantic City. You know, they start giving you points, and they wouldn't give us any points. So it's a big endeavor. You know, we start like working on it now, and it really hits a fever pace in July and obviously August for September.
So is that twice a year or?
Twice a year. We show over 60 movies, shorts, and full length movies. We had about 150 to 170 vendors, 30, 35 guests. We always try to have like one big guest and a whole bunch of other guests. Peter Criss, Crispin Glover, Sean Astin, John Waters, all of them have done something horror related. I mean, obviously, you know, Peter Criss being the drummer of Kiss and being in Phantom of the Paradise, and, you know, and just it's a great thing. I mean, I'm more of a logistical guy, and Ryan definitely works with all our guests and trying to get them all lined up. So the list is growing. And you can find us at njhorrorcon.com on Facebook or a standalone website. If you got any inquiries, just ask. We usually get right back to you.
That's awesome. So do you actually set up a table there yourself?
I will at times, sure. Depending on how things are. I'm fortunate that I have a bunch of kids, sons, and they tend to manage the table. I like to sell like horror books, magazines, ephemera, obviously Godzilla toys when I get them. The extra ones. I collect Godzilla too, so I've got a pretty big Godzilla collection. But there's always duplicates and doubles, and my philosophy always has been, I don't consider myself a dealer to say. I'm more of a professional collector. I buy things to buy other things, to sell things to buy other things. So it's not really a profit for me. It's all about grinding. It's about grinding. Am I off the air? Oh, that's weird.
No. I'm just switching things around.
Really threw me off. As again, I mentioned, I'm kind of a Luddite, so I really like Apple products because you can just push a button and theoretically they work, but then you just never know. Theory goes out the window.
Right on. So let's delve in a little more. You said you have producing credits over at Comic Book Men. How did that begin?
Well, when we started the sizzle reel, you know, we shot a third of that actually in my old office. That was an interior development reel, sort of give the network an idea of what we were doing. And then we obviously got the green light. And our first season, we did 8 one-hour episodes as opposed to our regular half-hour episode, which really boils down to 22 minutes. And I was an on-call, you know, expert. So that first season was really odd because I would just show up when people had questions and they would answer it. And they realized that it was a bigger spot. So the second season, I was brought in as an on-air expert again, but they gave me like a consulting credit, and it just took off from there. And a lot of the transactions I would help oversee to a certain degree. You know, certainly the items that are brought in, I would verify what they are, or if we need to find something for somebody to purchase out of the shop. You know, that would be one of my particular things, and just sort of blossomed from there. And didn't expect it. You know, I'm a guy, this is like my fourth career really. I worked in the city for 15, 17 years as an executive in North Wall Street, you know, producing annual reports in the 80s, and just one thing led to the other, and here I am. You know, very thankful for the opportunities at Comic Book Men and the guys and Kevin and, you know, all the EPs and coordinating producers. So last season I worked right under the coordinating producer. So my segment producer and I were sort of at the same level. So in theory, I was the third guy in producing on the floor during the shooting. So when they shoot the show, I would actually sit next to the executive producer and the coordinating producer. And if there was a question would come up, or they just want to ask some inane thing about, oh yeah, is that true? Was that 1907 or 1917? And, you know, if I couldn't answer it, I would be the research guy. And actually, when we go on set and do the podcasting, I run the research department. So I sit on headphones next to the director of photography, And if there's a question, I answer the question. But it's gotten pretty good. I mean, the fourth and fifth seasons, we were still sort of sussing out how to do things. You bring new associates or field producers in, and everybody wouldn't necessarily know what year the first Action comic is, and those sort of things you just sort of have to remind them.
Definitely.
Fascinating. I know, fascinating. You too can spend your life at flea markets. You're gonna.
It actually really
more
is.
Hair when I started, I must admit.
Well, yeah, didn't you have dreads when you were first on the show?
Yeah, I had dreads down. I actually found my dread in the warehouse today. It's like this long. It lives in a box. I'm going to put glass eyes and feet on it one day, and then put it in a case and say grandfather's thing, and just put it on a shelf, and hopefully 100 years from now they'll clone me. I got that.
We've got some statements down here that I'm going to click on real fast. That's what I love about this program. We got Brian Enright, who said, looking forward to New Jersey Horror Con. He loves that con. Brian is our resident horror guy.
Yeah, it's got a good vibe. We always have a big party on Saturday night. I mean, I think people are more interested in that than anything else. But last convention, we actually had Brian Quinn and Brian Johnson came in, and they did Space Monkeys, which is sort of an alternative to the Tell 'em Steve Dave. And I actually got to produce that in some weird sort of way, basically bringing them on stage, and then all the Serena Vincent and all these actresses and actors, Rick Mears, all these people came up, and it was great. It was great. Adam Green, who did Hatchet, was the director of Hatchet. It's amazing how sometimes things sort of just happen, and again, I find that just to be much more fulfilling than standing in front of something and going, "Oh yeah, that was from 1958." The show lasted 2 episodes. My Mother Car, starring Jerry Van Dyke. Did you know that? There was a show called My Mother Car, starring Jerry Van Dyke.
I did know that.
Google it. Look it up. That's Dick Van Dyke's younger brother. He was also on Taylor Moore show or Dick Van Dyke show, and he was in a lot of things. He was and Coach. He was the older Coach.
Right. But, exactly.
Digressing.
I actually have to kind of plug Brian Enright. They have a podcast also, and it's a horror-based one. And he's actually local to you, so he's
look into it. Give me a call. Call me. Use your telephone.
Yeah, they're with the Horror Syndicate, so definitely a good person to know, and he will. I'm assuming he'll be there also.
Special effects.
That's awesome. Guys, again, we are live right now. So if you have any questions for Mr. Robert Bruce, shoot them down in the comment section. I'll get them on screen, and we'll see what we can do to get them answered within reason. Yes.
But so let's talk about Margot Kidder. Margot Kidder passed away today, and
that's horrible.
I think we can't mark the day without giving her a super nod. No pun intended. I always think of her as a very sexy Lois Lane. Again, I'm a little older than most of the people that I think I'm older, but I remember the 1965 Superman and that Lois Lane, and Margot Kidder was head and shoulders above her. And I know that her family will sorely miss her. I don't know if she was ill. I got the sense that maybe she had been sick for a while. I know at one point she had. Yeah, well, she was 69. I mean, that's relatively young. Oddly enough, men in my family never lived past 69, but that's okay. But, I think, her character certainly paved the way for a lot of other women in superhero TV shows and whatnot. And I have to think there's some sort of stretch of connection, but with a Supergirl CW that, without Margot Kidder, that something like that wouldn't be in the direction it's going in now. Not the slightest.
I saw a really cool picture of her and Superman just kind of flying up in the heavens.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's crazy. Crazy. Things, first Princess Leia, now her.
Yeah. Too much in a year. Definitely. Looking over my notes, because I'm a note guy. I've got a whole notebook full of things here right now. So, did you have a role in shooting Clerks?
I did have a role in Shooting Clerks. Yes, it's very brief, and you have to look for it. But it was definitely, and those guys are great. They're actually from Scotland. Give them a lot of credit for all the work and effort that they did, and really to have it turn out the way it did. Oddly enough, they were on Comic Book Man.
Yes.
And I wasn't actually on set in front of the camera. It was another one of those weird things where the cameraman had worked all day, so they couldn't shoot at night. So the coordinating producer picked up the camera, and I actually was his tech guy. So when they're all coming in, I'm the guy who's like holding the lights up in back while the coordinating producer's shooting. So that's my little addition to that episode of Comic Book Men and Shooting Clerks. It was really strange because, but you can do whatever you want to do as a producer. When we shot the Batmobile Green Hornet Black Beauty race, I actually helped as one of the location supervisors, and I actually had to shut down the side of the street and had people like yelling at me who wanted to get out, but we were shooting in that direction. If you've ever seen that episode, Adam West's on the show,
yes.
Great, like fantastic for me, like one of those moments. But we shot in a certain direction where it looked like it was like an urban, like industrial, and in reality, it's like, West Side Red Bank, She restaurant, like a quarter of the town. But that one section was like, built in 1901, and it was the Eisner factory. Eisner, related to Michael Eisner of Disney, his great uncle's factory where they sewed the World War I doughboy uniforms at. So it's got this real gritty look, but it's all been redone. So you just never know. I mean, it's the magic of motion picture and TV cinema is you shoot in a certain way and it looks completely different.
So is that one of the most memorable things you've done on the show?
Yeah, well, meeting Adam West by far was maybe the top. I mean, Lando Calrissian certainly was up there too. Those guys are like awesome. I mean, but everybody comes on, and just the way that the show set up, and the opportunities that we get to work with people. Michael Coulter from Power Man, amazing. Luke Cage, excuse me, is from Luke Cage, Power Man.
Right, well,
but
yeah.
I ran into him at a convention, and he came up to me and said, "Hey, Rob, how you doing?" I go, "Holy shit, he remembers me." The best was when Method Man came up, and I realized afterwards because he was fucking with me, but he must have like looked at all the episodes. Oh, this is this guy, and he walked over and he goes, "You're Rob Bruce." I go, "Holy shit, you're Method Man." That's just the weird thing. Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's great meeting people. It's great, being able to enjoy what I've been doing for such a long time and going to conventions. I love going to conventions. I went to 5 in the last 4 weeks. Small, big, in between. Great Philadelphia, Garden State Comic Fest in Atlantic City, my Wayne Toy Show, which I do once a month. I've been doing the same toy show for 20 years, primarily because my dad had a spot there. And when he passed away, I took over his spot, and I sort of like a legacy to him. I just go. But it's one of those things where I love to go because I'm always finding crazy shit. I just buy like the weirdest thing because I know who's coming in and what they bring. And this guy always brings Japanese stuff. It's always under the table. And I've been buying from him for such a long time. I'll put things aside. And, for me, it's just the hunt. Maybe it's accumulation too, but, it's a hunt.
So how big is your warehouse exactly?
It's about 2,000 square feet. I mean, it's not huge. It's got an office. It's just primarily right now it's me and my older son comes in. He's just getting ready for high school. So he gives me a hand. He bags and boards and helps me organize stuff. But, as far as comics go, I collect underground comic books, which are more like R. Crumb and Robert Williams and, Bill Griffith and all this outside, Gilbert Shelton, Rory Hayes, and all these like outside artists who were really preeminent in 68 to about 76, 77. They produced all this underground material, and I'm really into that counterculture, Americana, anti-war, kind of ties into political pin collecting, But it's a thing. So we have a lot of stuff.
Hey, do you find a lot of people collecting that stuff now?
It's a lot more than it used to be. I think, its appreciation levels going up. Obviously, R. Crumb's a household name, multiple documentaries, movies, fascinating character. Traded 4 art books for a chateau in France, and has been living in France for about 20 years now. And is a blues jazz aficionado from the 20s and 10s, 20s, 30s. So he's really into that old school. I mean, if you're not familiar with Robert Crumb, you should look him up. R. Crumb has a great website. I get his newsletter like every month, and one of his daughters is drawing. One of his wife's draws. So and he's proficient to the point where he's got an OCD habit where he just draws all the time. So he's always creating, and I think that's real important if you're an artist. I mean, I do some art, so I try to create one piece of art every day, and you got to do what you got to do if you're an artist. I'm not a very good artist, but I do art.
Would love to see an example of that someday. That actually sounds really cool.
One of my pieces of art right there.
Nice. That's cool.
I did spend first and second grade in special ed, so I got that going for me. It's true too.
I still I can't even draw a stick figure properly.
Hey, you got to push the limits, whatever the limits are. The crazy thing is that a lot of artists, it comes easy to them, and they sort of knock us folks that really struggle. But I think everybody has an artist in them, regardless of what you're doing, and you should just go out and try to do it. And then you try to do sequential art. I mean, that's what I'm working on. Is trying to figure out how to do a real comic, which is incredibly difficult because you got to get the idea of the script and then marry it to pictures. So I give a lot of nod and credit to artists in general.
Absolutely. I've got a buddy in the field, Ray, who owns a comic, and he's still trying to break in.
What comic is it?
I would have to look it up. Brian, if you're still there, if you could tell me real fast, but they're just breaking in, and he day and night, the guy is at it.
It's tough to break into comics. I have to admit, the more I look at it, if you're a comic book artist, I really have to strongly stress this, that you have to work for one of the big 3. You got to do some due diligence, whether it's 4 books, 6 books, 10 books, whatever it is. You've got to establish yourself. I see great artists. I collect independent and outsider and just weird comic books. Like I got one here somewhere I was reading earlier. I can't find it now. Shit. But independent artwork every day. There's new artists coming out, and they need to be encouraged. But if you're a indie artist, you really need to think about working, at least doing something from Marvel or DC or trying out. Because to establish yourself and get your name out there, it's really difficult. I mean, everybody gets lucky. The Goons and the Ticks and the Teenage Ninja Mutant Turtles, they all started off as independent books.
That's right.
And nobody's better than Eastman and Laird in sort of fulfilling that expectation of what indie is and what isn't. But, that was a different time period. In 84, the black and white revolution had just taken off. And by 87, 88, the whole market had collapsed. And the Turtles had established themselves. And it created cartoons and then action figures and on. And they were producing action figures for 25, 30 years without a break, which is very difficult.
Oh, no doubt.
Very difficult. I've had the great fortune of talking and meeting with both Peter and Kevin Eastman. So we had Kevin Eastman obviously on the show, and Peter's a nice enough guy. He doesn't travel that far outside of where he lives, which I believe is in North Massachusetts or New Hampshire. But if you go up there, he does show up at shows, and he's a great guy to talk to, and just fascinating. Back history. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, the kids today don't realize that the Turtles were in black and white and they all looked alike. And the only thing that differentiated them were their weapons, I believe, at the time.
That's it. Well, and yeah, that's true, because in black and white, they wouldn't have had the different. Yeah,
they all had the same color masks.
The masks, right. They all had the same color masks. You're absolutely correct. It was the difference was the weapons. And those first 4 books are really dark. I mean, incredibly dark and rainy and gritty and almost they were alternative comic books, so they weren't following to any comic code or guidelines. So people would get stabbed and killed and kicked and beaten, you know, and robots would have their heads cut off, and the mousers would try to eat the turtles, and just great stuff. I mean, for me, I think that's really was one of the motivating factors of me collecting independent as heartily as I did. When I worked, I lived in the city, very fortunate. I lived in Lower East Side in the late 70s, early 80s, going to college. I was a bike messenger, and then I would work at one of the clubs during the weekdays, you know, helping with the lights and whatnot. It's a club called CBGB's. So we did that, and my local comic book store was right next to the Chelsea Hotel. It was Backdate Comics, and they actually were one of the few stores in the city that got those initial copies, the magazine size Turtle books. So I actually have those in my collection. I bought them new, you know, off the newsstand. Ironically, my number one that I bought off the newsstand was actually a second printing, because that book was that hot then. It was going, I think a first printing was going for $40, which was unheard of. 1983, 84, 84, you know, when, you know, $40 would buy you dinner for 2 weeks in New York City. $2.50. You know, people don't remember that stuff, but that's how it was.
That is fascinating, actually. Wow. Second printing that fast. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And, you know, they printed like the third book, which I think is a blue cover with the van. They printed those up for the New York Comic-Con back then. And I can't remember specifically which show it was, but they'd only printed 500 copies, and they had left a couple of the overlays off when they shot it. And they went back in and they printed the covers. So those first books of number 3 tend to be very, very scarce, if not rare. I think it's 3 and not 2. I'd have to think of it. Could be 2. No, 3. 3 for sure. But, you know, it's just one of those things you never expect. Sure. It's like Jack Kirby used to be at every Comic-Con in New York City. I went in 75 because I was so fascinated by what he was doing, and got to talk to him, and he would sit there and smoke his cigarettes because everybody smoked. Nobody thought about not smoking, but he was like at every show, and I just found like a program like in the mid '80s where he's at one of the shows. Just like, you know, you don't think about the opportunities you have. So when you go to a convention and there's no comic book artists because it's an entertainment convention, guys, there's a Comic-Con. Talking to you, wizard. But you know, you got to meet the Jim Sterankos and the Starlins and the Simonsons and all those great old artists who are out there, George Perez. And just those opportunities aren't going to last forever. And I really strongly suggest, if you're into comic books, don't get them signed. Well, get them signed, but don't get them CGC'd. Everybody wants to CGC everything. I'm real anti-CGC because I like to read comics. I was reading, like, you know, Demon number 5, you know, Jack Kirby book. How am I going to read that if it's encased?
Exactly. But I mean, even if you want to display a prized possession, I don't know. I think it's kind of...
It's kooky, man. It's definitely kooky. There's no argument there.
I'm curious, Rob, do you have a way to check your IM right now or no?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. I'm getting IM'd a lot. Just a simple yes or no. An incident happened last week or earlier last week. Any discussing that or no?
I can't discuss it right now. 2 weeks' time, we'll be able to discuss it. All I can say is that there's 2 sides to every story.
Understand completely. And like, I wanted to ask that off air. So
that's all right. It's all right. I've been taking a lot of heat for it. I don't mind taking heat. You know, I am who I am. I've been doing this a long, long time. I contribute to what I have contributed to the show earnestly. And, you know, sometimes you just can't get along with everybody. I always consider Mike to be like a brother to me. And, you know, shit happens. Shit happens in the family. It's just the way it is. 2 weeks' time, you know, I've already been asked, and we'll discuss it then.
All right. Again, I apologize. It's something I wanted to...
So anybody out there, you're not going to get any answers, and what you've heard is just one side of the story. So you can say whatever you want. That's fine.
Fair enough. I still want to talk about Popculturism. You got a website for that, correct?
Yeah, it's a little dated, primarily because I'm a dated guy. It's mostly underground comic books. There are some kaiju pieces up, but it is what it is. Yeah,
Do you
I have
run
actually
that?
updated it today, of all things. But
You run that yourself?
yeah, it's a mom and pop or operation. My wife and I work on that. I mean, it's outdated for sure. It needs to be updated. It does. It came out prior to the iPad and iPhone, so it fits, but it doesn't fit quite well.
I've tried to deal with websites and doing it myself. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
At least in my opinion, trying to get everything neat, tidy, and keeping up with it.
All right.
It looked like you were concentrating on something.
I was trying to figure out if I can actually see the IMs, but I can't see them. I don't know how to like access both at the same time. I'm sorry for that.
No worry. Well, I was going to IM you and ask you if that was something we could discuss.
Just curious now as to what people are saying, but no, I prefer not to, because we're going through some things, and it happens. I mean, I don't know how people react to everybody's.
I know another question that comes up a lot: a day on the set of Comic Book Men. Is that like a 12-hour day? How long are you on the set?
Yeah, 12 hours sounds about right. Usually calls at 9, so we show up at 7:30, 8 o'clock for producers, and we have a 9 o'clock meeting, and we shoot on a regular transactional day. You'll shoot 3 transactions, which take about 2 to 3 hours each, so that's 9 hours there. And you've got a break for an hour because everybody's on the clock, and then there's usually a winding down period, 7. So usually you start at 7 and go to 7, 12 hours. 12 hours for 3 months. Every
wow.
day. And then the special days are A stories. So you come out of it a little tired.
Got to take its toll on you, no?
Yeah. But I mean, you get used to it. There's a lot of R&R on the weekends. We've always the guys have had houses at the beach, so it tends to be a congregation area, and it's just one of those things. You got to work and produce, and you need to get a certain number of transactions for the season. So we shoot like 70, and that's 21 days minimum, maybe more depending on 21, 7. No, so actually more than that. So it's probably 30 days just shooting transactions, and it all adds up.
Very cool. Well, we're reaching the end of our program. A couple of more things I wanted to do. Again, for the New Jersey HorrorCon and Film Festival, when's the next date for that?
That is the weekend of September 21st, 22nd, and 23rd at the Showboat, which is now a convention center. It's right in between the Hard Rock convention. What is it? Hard Rock. What do they call it? Casino, which is just opening up. It's opening up next week, and the Oceans Casino, which is opening up as well. So that whole end of the boardwalk's become back to life, and so it's going to be great. We went to an event there already. We'll be down there next week for another event, and we're just doing some PR and pushing it. The new list of guests is up, and that will continue to grow, and we're looking forward to it. And
excellent. And we talked about Popculturism. That has a website. We could find you on Twitter.
Yes. At Popculturism.
All right.
And on Instagram as the same. And then on Facebook pretty much is the same, but as Rob Bruce as well.
Excellent. All right. So you have the remaining time. Plug away anything you like that you've got going on.
I will be at May 26th is at It's a Toy Show, which is at Far Point Collectibles, which I believe is in Margate, but it's down off of Black Horse Pike, just south of Atlantic City. It is one of the best free open-air toy shows / collectible shows on the East Coast. It's the 10th year. We've been to all of these shows. It was started by Frankie Maz and my good friends Justin and Penelope. Justin also plays with a bunch of my friends in a band called Solace, which unfortunately they won't be playing. But if you're into toys, that's the place to go to. Then we'll be at, I believe we're at Terrificon, which is in August, at Mohegan Sun, and a whole bunch of other shows in between. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's been great.
Absolutely. And they can find this stuff on your Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram.
Yeah, I usually update it. I'm going to be doing some plugs for the It's a Toy show in the next couple of days, next week or so, because it's still 2 weeks away. But, you know, we do pretty much 45 to 50 shows a year, and you just sort of, you know, I put them up as they come along.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you very much for being on the show. It has been an honor. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Bruce, head popculturist at Popculturism, co-creator, co-owner, New Jersey HorrorCon and Film Fest, and also seen on AMC's Comic Book Men with producer credits. So stay tuned for what he has coming up, because he may have another project in the works that he may be coming back and letting us know.
We'll let you know for sure. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. If you could stand by for one moment while I end the broadcast, I'd appreciate it, sir.
I'm here.